My name is Colum McCann. This is Lisa Consiglio.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so very much. I am honored to be here. I want to tip my hat to Arlo and his entire team. I ran a literary organization for 10 years. I know how difficult this is. I can't imagine how difficult it is in the third year of a pandemic. So thank you so much for their incredible efforts. It's really extraordinary to be here and very honored and very nervous. I haven't done this in 2.5 years.
So Lisa is the founder of Narrative 4, and I'm the co-founder. And we're here to talk to you about this organization, which I think is one of the most incredible organizations that I've come across and I've had the opportunity to engage in, talking about taking on the world of education, storytelling, bringing young people into the fold, bringing artists into the fold. And we're going to give you a whole background to the organization, what it is that we do. And then we'd really like to hear from you, especially the teachers who are out there, because this is a global, non-profit organization that uses stories and storytelling to affect change and to inculcate the idea of radical empathy, stepping into one another's shoes, where young people tell each other stories and then they tell them back to each other in the first person. And it is through the act and the art of such a thing that this empathy is fostered, and then they go out and they create change on the ground. I'm reminded of Edward Abbey, who said that sentiment without action is the ruin of the soul. And what we're really interested in is seeing those young people create brand new territory for stories and storytelling all over the globe. And we're currently in 12 countries, and we will be in many more in the very, very, very near future. And we are guided by students, guided by teachers, and guided by artists as well. And we're going to talk to you about how we try to knit the whole fabric of that together again. But I have to tell you that Lisa she's the brains and also the brawn behind it all. Can you tell us how...
He wants me to buy him a cocktail, clearly.
Yeah.
It's all free.
No, but can you tell us how this all began and where it came from for you?
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I so enjoyed the last session. There was a bit of the question about poetry and kids and how to get them excited about it really kind of laid one of the foundational blocks to Narrative 4. So I'm really excited to talk a little bit about that. But as I mentioned before, I mean, there's a lot. We are all made up of a lot of stories and tapestry and of them woven in. And my journey led me to run a literary organization in Colorado in 2003. And too much information, but I was going through a divorce at the time, and
it's pre-cocktail hour. All right.
I'm going to pretend I paid for that. Thank you. And the long and short is, in February of 2004, I had inherited this rather wild 20-something-year-old organization that really wasn't too. It wasn't streamlined, and I wanted to theme it. And I happened to hear about 3 amazing artists who were appearing in New York City at NYU's Ireland House, and it was the late, great Frank McCourt, Roddy Doyle, and Colum McCann. I did not know who Colum McCann was in 2004. I flew to New York. Nor did he. I flew to New York. I sat in this tiny little room and watched this extraordinary event. It was the early 100th anniversary of James Joyce, right?
Yeah.
And I was blown away. And I formed a great relationship with both Frank and Colum, and eventually Roddy as well, who Frank and Colum both became ambassadors of this organization that I was running. And in 2007, 4 years later, this core methodology that Colum McCann just mentioned, the Story Exchange, entered my life. And I was watching these barriers break down, these divides bridge up and down the Roaring Fork Valley in Colorado. People who, if you mention Aspen, what comes to mind? If you mention Parachute, which is just down there are oil fields everywhere and so forth. And all these people, they didn't have a lot in common. but they're stories. They had their stories in common, and all of a sudden they became stories. That's what makes us human, right? So we started running the story exchange all over Colorado, and then we started to flirt with it a little bit outside of the state. I was running this literary festival in June of every year and bringing authors from all over the world. I themed the very first one in 2005. It was Ireland, so we explored the literary heritage of Ireland. Then we did India, and we did Mexico, the American South. We did the Middle East, Africa, 5 countries in Africa. And I was meeting these authors who were just blowing my mind. I know that there's a young writers program here, and when they walk into the classrooms, they were lighting up these kids' lives in a way where they just wanted more. Wow, I can do that. I can write. I can write poetry or lyrics or what have you. And they were learning from authors and artists all over the world. And so in 2012, I brought, 24 actually, of the writers that I'd been working with and artists that I'd been working with since 2003 together to go through a story exchange. And it was one of those moments where everybody in the room on the third day of the summit just stopped and said, this core methodology has got to get out as fast as possible. And this is on the heels of Reading at Risk, the NEA's disastrous, sad study that shows the decline in reading, especially among young people for pleasure. And so that really became the through line, is when these kids stop reading for pleasure, as we're seeing right now, there's the demise really of civic engagement, philanthropy, and democracy. And so Narrative 4 was, as Colum said, created. It's artist-driven, student-led, and educator-shaped. And we use the story exchange as the core methodology to get kids excited about the act of storytelling, the art of storytelling, but then it becomes about almost tricking young people into getting excited about learning from one another from all over the world. It's experiential education, and the through line is civic engagement. They work on projects together all over the world, and once they find out what they can do together, success begets success, and they start to work on other projects all over the world, and they're learning while they're doing it, and they are born to tell stories, as we all are.
So to bring the local, or to bring the universal down to the local, we'll just tell you a little bit about one of the programs that we're currently running, right? So we're in a high school in the South Bronx, the second poorest congressional district in the United States. We're also in a high school in eastern Kentucky, the Appalachian country, and also another poor area of the country. And these kids, they seem to be polar, like gulfs, faults apart, if you will. On one hand, you've got kids here who are primarily black and or immigrant, kids here who are white and or Cherokee, kids here who are urban, kids here who are rural, kids here who are from supposedly blue areas, kids here from supposedly red areas, and frankly, they're kind of terrified to get together with one another. But when they do, and they get together to tell a personal story, something intimate from their lives, something that really matters to them, they suddenly see all these walls come tumbling down, these borders dissolving. They frankly, it might sound a little twee to some people, but they see the humanity in one another. And one of the things that we all know about this country, especially now and all around the world, is that we are being dehumanized because we are not allowed to tell our story, or we're not allowed to enter into the act and the art of the greatest democracy in the world, which is the art of storytelling. And so these young people, this young girl who wears a hijab and lives in the South Bronx, she meets up with a young boy who drives a pickup truck and has a shotgun in the back. And he has to tell her why he uses a shotgun, and she has to tell him about her life. Suddenly, by telling these small, intimate stories to one another, he begins to realize, oh, beneath that hijab, she's actually got some AirPods in there, and she's listening to some of the same music that I'm listening to, and she's not so different from me. And she's listening to him saying how he has to take that shotgun out and shoot rabbits because his family are so poor that they can't put food on the table. And she never thought of a white kid in that sort of same situation. And suddenly, the world is messy again. And the world is beautiful when it's messy, Because part of the problem, I think, right now, or we tend to think, is that so many times we are reduced to simplicities and reduced to only one thing. But when they get together to tell one another stories, so if we had done this today, I would stand up and say, "Hi, my name is Lisa Consiglio," and she would stand up and say,
"Hi, my name is Colum McCann."
And then we would go on to tell the stories of one another. And what happens is, when you tell a story in your mind, yeah, the brain is like a circus. But when you tell somebody else's story, it's like a
Pinball machine.
Yeah.
It really is. It just lights up even when you're listening to stories from other people, when you retell it in the first person and you suspend engagement with the rest of the world and you break down that isolation, you decrease the loneliness, and you become somebody, you honor someone. It's not like you become the other person, but you honor someone else's story to whatever extent, and you lose the fear and the hatred. It's like, we're all just human, it's universal here. We're all in this together, and they feel it, and they fall in love, literally in love with one another, and almost immediately. It's pretty mesmerizing to watch, and we weren't sure how far it would go. But when we started connecting people and kids in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, with kids in Chicago, and watching what was happening, and the planet just got expanded and got a lot smaller. It's the global and the local.
So what Lisa did was she harnessed the power of all these great storytellers. Toby Wolfe was there the first time we ran this program. Terry Tempest Williams, Ishmael Bea is part of what we do. Marlon James. There's so many great artists who have come together. Sting is part of our musical arm, and obviously, these people know the powers of stories and storytelling, but really what they want to do is also get it out into the schools. So for me, we have artists, who are integral to this process, but for me, the absolute heroes of where we happen to be right now are the teachers. And I know we have a number of teachers in the audience here today, and I hope I'm not just playing to the crowd. Honestly, when I came through the airport the other day, I hear across the loudspeaker, anybody with a military card or active military duty, please, board the plane first. And I think that's great. That's cool. I know these people are doing all sorts of wonderful things, but I can't wait. I can't wait until the day when you take up your teacher's union card and you walk up there and you're allowed first onto the plane. That's when we start to revolutionize education. That's when we start to look at things and turn things inside out, which is part of what we're trying to do at Narrative 4. Because these teachers who are in Kentucky are now liaising with teachers in the Bronx. Scores go up, attendance goes up, problems in the schools go down. It's truly extraordinary. We've done all sorts of studies on this now. But not only can they be with one another, from Kentucky to the Bronx, but they can be in Kentucky to Kentucky, or Kentucky to Ireland, or Kentucky to the West Bank, or and there's all sorts of ways that we can, as we see it, sort of increase the lungs of the world through the very fine act of personal storytelling. And when I say personal storytelling, I think it's really important for us to understand that nobody's trying to be didactic here. Nobody's trying to say, well, you should be voting Democrat and you should not be voting Republican or whatever else it happens to be. It's through the beauty of the small stories that the actual universal tends to get received and in a certain way also relieved. Lisa has seen whole schools changed, culture of whole schools and even areas changed. Can you talk a little bit about what happened in, say, South Africa?
Yeah, we're piloting quite a bit. I will tell you that Colum mentioned that we have a 5-year campaign we really want to be in every school in the world. And what's happening right now is superintendents are finding the superintendent in the South Bronx where we work, and in Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky, they're actually making it more and more mandatory. In Ireland, it's actually mandatory that the entire country has mandated that Narrative 4 be a part of the curriculum. But in South Africa, we're piloting 3 different things right now. Learning modules based on based on amazing works of fiction and nonfiction, and those are being piloted in the Bronx and Kentucky. We're piloting our artist network, which is growing globally. We've got about 250 artists from around the world right now. And then the civic engagement project that we are piloting is in South Africa, in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. And this is, I don't like the word at all, marginalized, but this area in South Africa, as many areas, the systemic failures are incredible. And there's 80% unemployment rate, and there's no food, and it's really incredible. And what we've done is this is all. We have a director of operations in Africa. We have a director of regional operations in South Africa, and it's all 100% community built. You define, Narrative 4 is here to support with learning modules, artists, and whatever we can do, but we're really growing this civic engagement project, and it's called Trash to Treasure, and it's fairly straightforward and simple. The kids become engaged with one another, and there are areas that have turned around in Louisiana. There are areas all over the place that have turned around through projects like this. So they're connecting with one another through stories, through education, through art, and cleaning up this township that is notoriously poor and kind of bleak. And now all of a sudden, what's happening with art projects, and there's food, and there's a police. They're building a whole compound designed to help kids in need who don't have access to medical, assistance or doctors or basic things that we have, like police services and garbage disposals and waste disposals and fire protection and so forth. And they're really turning that community around, but they're engaging other communities while they do it. So it's 100% civic engagement, which is, again, the through line of Narrative 4. And this is something that we feel will be scalable around the world in various pieces, whether it's all a whole thing and the Eastern Kentucky takes on, or Mumbai in India. There are a variety of places that we're seeing this come to action, and it's really incredible because it is the culmination, and it's the most exciting part for me about Narrative 4, and it's all fueled by this little simple story exchange. We have all the technology we need, and yet we're lonelier and more isolated than ever, and we're really out to change that.
So in South Africa, it was built up from young people getting together and telling one another stories, and them recognizing the need within their township for recycling and for cleanup and so on, and for them putting their empathy, their newfound empathy for one another into action on the ground. These are the young people who are doing it. They've got all the solutions. I think there's so many Greta Thunbergs out there, and there's probably one in every single classroom in this country too, but they haven't necessarily been given a chance to do the things that they really want to do. So there is incredible opportunity that we see for real change to happen on the ground. And guess what? It really became apparent, January, February 2020, when the isolation became so profound. When we were talking about how meaningless things happen to be, and if we were able to connect young people virtually across the world, that was something that set about as a big challenge for our organization. Now, listen, we started really small, a number of years ago, and now we're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the need for this is truly extraordinary. Right?
Yeah, I know that there's a cocktail hour looming, and everybody wants to engage with that, and we're so excited. That's a lot of information. We want everyone to be involved. It's not about us, clearly. This is an incredibly diverse organization, and the testimonials from the students, the artists, the teachers, are the most important thing that we have. It's backed by a lot of people who understand that this has got to get out there really fast. We're in trouble right now. We really are, and this is needed, and these kids have so much power. And for us to tap into that power in a way that our current politicians don't seem to want them to do, I think Colum says this a lot, we're not as dumb as our politicians and our media, outlets seem to think that we are, and especially these kids.
That's right.
They are absolutely incredible. And I am inspired every single day by what they do, so I learn from them. I love being here with all of you and around great artists and poetry. Lyrics, we work a lot with lyrics and to get kids tapped into really great lyrics. And the stories behind what you can, what has, whether I can name, I'll date myself, but a Bruce Springsteen song or something, there's so many great lyrics out there and you can learn so much and they get involved, they get excited about writing and history and the world itself and they want to know more. And we think we've tapped into something really special here. And do we have time for questions?
Yeah,
Great.
We have another 25 minutes.
Oh.
Yeah. So I do want to open it up to questions, and then we'll expand on this a little bit more. But as a writer, as an artist, yeah, you want your work to do something in the world, but for me personally, when I go into a high school, like I went to the high school yesterday in Key West, and I see those young faces, and I just see the hunger that there is there for them to feel meaningful, and for their stories to matter. It's an incredible thing. And guess how many young people will come up to you and say, "Oh, I don't have a story." And then you say, oh, yes, you do have a story. And then the thing is, the transaction goes that you tell somebody the story, they tell the story back to you, and then you tell their story. It's this double-edged thing. And people say, oh, wow, my life is meaningful. My story is meaningful. And they go on to do sort of incredible things. But the one thing that we can't do is we can't afford to drop these young people either. That's where the teachers come in. That's where this has to be a sort of ongoing engagement with the world, and that's why we're getting bigger and bigger. But for me personally, as an artist, yes, I do. I love writing my books. I will always go ahead and write my books. But I feel that incredible change happens within the classroom. When I see the teachers doing this work. And I do think that one of the few available democratic spaces that is left right now is in especially high school classrooms in this country. I do realize that there are wealthy schools that are doing this, and there are schools in poorer neighborhoods that are not looked after in the right way, but the access and the protection of our democracy really happens, I think, in the classroom, in our schools, and the more respect that we can have for that, and the more we can help, empower our teachers and to engage with art and artists, the better off we will all become.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just to feed off of that really quickly, riff off of that, what Colum was saying, when you go through this exchange, narrative 4 is built on a continuum, so that entry point to a very long continuum is the story exchange. But what happens after you, Colum said, I can't tell you how many people have told me, I don't have a story to tell. And then once they go, here, it's endless. We're born storytellers, all of us. And when they get on that continuum, what happens after that story exchange, when they hear other people's stories, as a facilitator and the founder, as you watch what happens, no matter where I am, you can watch the faces, not necessarily when they're hearing their story being retold in someone else's, in someone else's voice, but what happens when they hear somebody else's story, and it's sort of like, I went through that too, and so you've got 20, 30 people, and they're all telling these different stories, and it's sort of like this, wow, I didn't know anyone else went through that. I had no clue. I thought I was so alone, and teenagers do think that they're alone, and when they find out through that connection and through that other voice that their isolation is not foreign, it really isn't. This is something that a lot of teenagers are going through, especially now, and they just embrace each other in ways where they become such fast and furious friends, really, for a very long time. I've had people tell me, now it's been, 13, 14 years, people tell me, I will never forget exactly where I was when that person retold my story for the very first time. The world stopped for me in a very, very good way. And that's kind of priceless today.
And I'm reminded of the American poet Jim Harrison, who said that death takes away a lot of things, but it cannot take away our stories. And that at the fundamental building blocks of who we are, the atoms of who we are, seems to me to be the art and of stories and storytelling. And it's not some light thing that floats off in the breeze. Let's not forget that stories can take away your house. Stories can take away your country. Stories can take away, there is a potential violence that goes on in so much of this as well. But when these young people get together to tell their personal stories, there is an electricity between them, unlike anything that I've happened to witness before. And before we open it up to questions, do you want to just talk about the future and what it is that you see for the...
Yeah, and again, thank you so much for letting, this feels a little, it's not about promoting Narrative 4, but it's really about promoting artists and stories and the art of storytelling. So and we are engaging in a 5-year push. Our strategic plan is to get us into, actually the numbers are pretty impressive. I was listening to other people talk about the silver lining to COVID, and it's a really terrible thing to say because there's not one, and I know a lot of people have suffered through enormous loss. For us as an organization, however, we hired a COO just under the wire in February of 2020, and we were able to create a plan for scale via a digital platform that we're building that will get us into, we think, for sure every school in Ireland in the next 2 years, and every school in the United States in 5. And to hire, now we're operating on 4 continents, but to be able to be everywhere as quickly as possible and to get as many facilitators. We are based on a train-the-trainer model, which means anybody can be involved. Anybody can facilitate story exchanges at any time. We actually tripled our staff in 1 year. And again, there are a lot of people who have come to us to say, we really want to support this. We know how badly this is needed in my area and around the globe. So our push is, it's pretty fast, it's pretty furious. We've got a lot of people out there, and again, thank you for allowing us to talk about it because it's so necessary. A lot of people who really do want to watch us hit our goal over the next 5 years in 2 years, and we actually think that we might be able to do that. But I can talk about numbers all day long. I won't bore you with them, but it's extraordinary what we're trying to do. The digital platform is brand new, tailored to Narrative 4. It'll go live in June of this year. And there will be a civic engagement arm and an artist network arm and a learning modules arm that will be unveiled by the end of this year. It's safe, it's strategic, it's really smart, and the operative word being safe. It takes one mistake when you're dealing with young people and their stories, and they're very fragile. And also very strong, but that is something that we've been working on for the past 2 years, is to make sure that this digital platform, when it is launched, is incredibly safe and secure for anyone who wants to be involved.
And can I also say, and then I'd like to open it to questions. It's also a hell of a lot of fun.
It's
seriously,
deeply imaginative.
If
I see one more nonprofit with doom and gloom, it is so much fun. It is incredibly fun to do this. Yeah.
And you see these young people, and they light up the world. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
So do we have questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh my God, you're taking me going.
Hi, my name is Ritza. I am a high school English teacher, one of those.
Yay.
And I'm wondering, how does one go about getting involved, becoming a part, whether it's a teacher or a parent or what?
Are you here in Florida? In Miami, great. So we, as I mentioned, we tripled our staff, and we have regional managers that are sort of responsible for various parts of the country. And I have a card. I'm happy to give it to anyone who wants it, and put you in touch with that particular regional manager. And he's amazing, actually, the one who's in charge of Florida. And they would put you in touch with various facilitators if you want to become a trainer. There are varying degrees of that as well. Everything from a basic facilitator on, which is super important, on up to what we call master practitioners, who really have a lot of power to speak for the organization itself. Yeah, to do all kinds of, as I said, but there are a lot of ways to become involved. We started out in English classes. That's where we cut our teeth in English classes and in Colorado, and it's sort of gone from there, and it includes science and math now, which is incredible, obviously history, and it really is an incredible learning experience for these kids, and it offloads teachers, so we'd love to have you involved.
So, yeah, we'll train you.
Yeah.
Please
It doesn't take, and we can do it virtually. It doesn't have to be in person, obviously, these days.
Hi, my name's Shara. I worked for years in another New York City profit doing storytelling, teaching, and our program just got cut and replaced with a video gaming program. And so I've experienced the highs and lows of storytelling in schools. And I'm wondering, in your approach, are you all working, do you have different modules? Are you there for a short term and then you leave and hope that the program kind of lives on its own? I know you mentioned training teachers and they maybe train others. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about like the concrete detail of that. And then if this is everything in classrooms during the day, or is there kind of like an after school club component? Curious about that.
I'll start with the second question. When I moved from Colorado to New York via Chicago, and I was told, you absolutely cannot work in the public schools there. And the very first thing I did was to create a team who went to work in the public schools. You have to be in the after-school programs. So it was very much an after-school program at first, and I thought, we're learning the best lessons ever by going into the public schools in a very, very tough city. So it can go anywhere, but one thing that we are adamant about is this is not a one-off. We can do a story exchange, we can do one every minute of every day, and that's that. But we are hiring the way that we are to create very deep relationships, very long-lasting relationships. University Heights High School, it was the very first one of 5 partnership that we created. And we test in those schools through Yale University, University of Chicago, University of Pennsylvania, and UNC. They're all running tests in that particular school and others. The principal is a master practitioner. Their counselor is a master practitioner. It is theirs, but it is very symbiotic. I mean, it is a two-way street for us. We learn so much from them. They learn from us. We're piloting the learning modules based on 5 books right now there. We're also piloting, as I mentioned, civic engagement projects alongside of University Heights High School and increasing the artist network in that particular area with the artists that the kids really want to connect with. So it's a very, very deep relationship, and one of the things as we scale, and as I mentioned superintendents earlier, they are really sitting up and paying attention because they see the depth of that, and they want it in the classroom. So it is done mostly in the classrooms during the day, but it spills over into after-school programs and also into evening homework sessions. They'll get online and connect with one another all over the world because they know it, their parents know it's safe, their teachers know it's safe, and they come to school the next day bubbling with enthusiasm about what they've learned from somebody in South America.
And sometimes it's some of the toughest kids, the ones that you find tough to reach, who are the ones who actually want to tell a story. I mean, I have to reiterate what Lisa just said. I mean, we have an epidemic of loneliness, an epidemic of meaninglessness, and then this meaning gets rediscovered in certain ways, and so we have to shepherd it, and we have to be safe, and we have to be sound with the policy that's going on. But and it's people like you who hopefully will help us to, grow the program in several different directions.
And I can go on and talk about the leadership development. Oh, yeah, please, go ahead. Leadership development and the learning, the skills that come through all of this that teachers love, and administrators too, of course.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I teach college English, but my interest is your international component. About 9 years ago, I co-founded a program in Nicaragua with rural children, and now they're graduating college. Yes, they're graduating college. High school and going on to college. And I wanted to know, what do you have in place for communities like that? They're rural and also where they don't speak English. Yeah. So do you have something in place for Central America?
So thank you for that, and that's wonderful to hear. We hired a couple of things. First of all, our target audience was 16, 17-year-olds, but we are very active in colleges. We have 3 lead partners in the United States right now at the college level that are helping us scale, because this, as I said, it's a continuum. In those particular communities that you're talking about, we just hired a director of operations in Mexico who's translated everything that we've done, worked with a team to translate everything that we're doing into Spanish. The digital platform that we have right now has the capability for 18 languages, and that will be moving on up very, very rapidly. We actually did the very first rule, and it's very good. I mean, the very first international story exchange I did was between Port-au-Prince and New Orleans back in 2010, right after the first massive earthquake in Haiti, to connect kids in those 2 areas that have been hit by huge natural disasters. And obviously, French being that language in Haiti, the kids at the time, this was a long time ago, they translated for one another. It was really incredible, some of the way that they stepped in, because we didn't have anything in French at that particular time. And now clearly there are so many ways to do this. They can actually interpret instantly. There are some programs that we're incorporating into the digital platform that will do that automatically. The rural areas, we learned a lot when we were in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico right before the pandemic. We ran an exchange where these kids would come together, but in very different ways, obviously, than the more cosmopolitan areas. And it worked beautifully. Smaller groups in different settings, maybe not in schools. These teachers and these community organizers became facilitators so that those kids were not left, out. And it wasn't, again, to the other question, it wasn't just in the schoolrooms. Some people were being homeschooled, for instance, and they wanted that experience. You cannot have a great American education without an amazing international, global component. And we've learned this time and time again. We have so many donors who say, I'm only interested in funding things in the United States. And our answer is, well, then fund it globally, because you are funding, the United States, and it's super important to have that rural experience. So we thought a lot about this, but I'd love to hear more about your experiences, because certainly we don't have all the answers.
And we will do that, I think, over cocktail. I love the presence of our pigeons here who are cooing and coming along and talking to us. What I do want to say is we're available, and we would love to talk with you. And we're available as an organization for your schools as well. But I'm also humbled by the fact that we had this chance to communicate this with you. Thank you so much for listening. It's incredibly important. We are the ones, and the young people are the ones who are going to be able to facilitate this change. It's really incredibly important. For us to have a chance to, through the festival, through your community, through your schools, to engage like this, I'm just deeply grateful for the listening. And I do think that they're trying to tell us something with the coo going on in the background. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much for
everything.
the opportunity. Thanks, Arlo and everybody. Thank you.